Next we've got ace jack offsuit in the small blind, under the gun +1, raises to 20. I call, we're heads up out of position, the flop comes jack 7-6 with 2 hearts, we've got top. I check with plans of raising if the opponent bets. Under the gun +1 fires for 30. When we've got ace jack and king jack, we'll be raising for value, whereas I'll be calling with worse top pair hands. We follow through with the plan and raise to 105. Under the gun +1 isn't too concerned. He calls somewhat quickly. He could have us beat with an overpair, maybe he has a draw of some sort. The turn is the 4 of spades. I'm not entirely convinced that we've got the best hand. I check to see how the opponent wants to proceed. He checks back. Now I feel much better about our cards, particularly because the river is the ace of clubs, giving us top 2 pair. We're almost for sure best. The ace of hearts is still unaccounted for. I announce a bet of 300 to target ace-high flush draws that have improved the top pair and want to pay us off. Instead, the opponent folds before we get our chips out there, as he lets us know that he missed his draw.
I had 8-9, but not a no.
Here we've got ace-king suited in the cutoff, under the gun +1 limps in. I raise to 20. The small blind is wearing money repellent, and it seems to be working effectively as $20 comes off of his stack that he'll never be seeing again. Under the gun +1 calls also. We're going 3 ways to the flop. The dealer puts out ace 8-3 with 2 spades. We've got top with a flush draw. The small blind leads with a small bet of 15, which will 100% be getting raised. Under the gun +1 folds. We don't want to raise too much because we definitely like the small blind to stick around. I go with a sizing of 50. The small blind doesn't seem to be considering putting in a re-raise. He just calls for 35 more. Probably has a worse draw or a 1-pair hand at best. The dealer is a Beyonce fan and is singing "Let Me Upgrade You" as she puts out the 10 of spades, giving us the nuts. Small blind checks. We're now tasked with determining a bet size that'll help us get the maximum value while being careful not to induce a fold. It's really important to make sure that we get called in this case since our opponent is likely drawing dead. I bet 70. This amount does the trick. The small blind calls. We've got him hooked. The river is another 8, pairs the board so we no longer have the best possible hand. Still, we're very strong and there's no reason to believe that the opponent has us beat with a full house. Small blind checks. Again, we need to get max value, but we don't want to overdo it. I ultimately go with a sizing of 225. Our opponent doesn't like it even a little bit. His name is Nicky Rings because he likes dressing up his fingers. The small blind figures that he might be beat. He just can't help himself though. He calls. We turn over our monster. It gives us the victory. We get about the most value possible, especially when we hear how light we got called on the river.
Nick Rings. Pocket queens.
I make mental note not to try and bluff Nicky. We take down the pot to get unstuck for the day. We're actually up several hundred. We switch tables, then pick up a couple of jigs onto the gun. I raise to 20. When I'm involved in a hand, the players swarm like sharks around wounded animals in the sea. Under the gun +1, under the gun +2, and the big blind all call. We're going 4 ways to the flop. It comes queen 5-4 rainbow to make life difficult for us. The good news is that we all check. I doubt the 2 players behind me would check if they had a queen or better. The only person I'm worried about having us beat at the moment is the big blind. The turn is the 10 of clubs. It's not a bad card as long as no one has pocket 10s. The big blind checks. I've now ruled out him having us beat because he would have likely bet a queen or better once all of us early position players check the flop. I actually feel confident that we can bet and get value out of hands containing a 10, like ace 10, king 10, jack 10, 10, 9. We should be able to get calls out of straight draws as well. I bet 35 for value. Under the gun +1 is given up. He folds. Under the gun +2 isn't as eager to let go. He calls. After checking twice, the big blind is all of a sudden going to rep a big hand. He raises to 155. This is another line that makes no sense. I don't have a great track record facing raises so far today. I incorrectly called a river raise early on, then incorrectly folded to a suspect river raise less than 20 minutes ago. It's extremely rare that someone check raises with a real hand after a check through on the previous street, particularly when not much changes on the turn that would lead anyone to think an opponent behind might bet. I'm sorry guys, but I'm going to have to call with second pair, even with another player behind us because I'm not buying the big blind story. I matched the bet for 120 more. There's a bit of a dicey situation. Under the gun +2 folds. It's down to heads up in what's become a sizable pot. The river is another queen, reducing the likelihood that the big blind is holding one. I'm glad to see it. The big blind brings his cursor over to the start button and clicks shut down before he checks. He's either got a very strong hand or air. There's not much point in betting. I check back.
You win.
thought so.
We catch a thief in action to win a big pot, but we never find out what the big blind made his move with since he returned his cards face down to the dealer. We run cold for a bit before picking up pocket sevens under the gun +1. Under the gun limps in for 5. I raise to 20. The hijack, cutoff, big blind, and under the gun all call. We're going 5 ways to the flop. It comes king, queen, 4 rainbow. That's not even remotely fun for us. We've got third pair and about the same probability of winning this as Phil Hellmuth randomly hitting a 3-pointer at night on an outdoor court while getting 10-1 on a $1,000 bet. All players check. The turn is the 7 of diamonds, giving us a set out of nowhere. Checks to me. We're in a fire for value. I bet 65. Our line should look strange, so we might get called light or even raised. The hijack calls. He's the only customer though. The cutoff, big blind, and under the gun player all fold. It's down to heads up. The river is the 9 of spades. The diamond draw bricks, but Jack 10 improves to a straight. We don't have any removal to top pair, so I announce a large bet of 175. The hijack must have missed a draw because he folds immediately. We don't get paid, and the dealer has quick hands, so we don't even get a good look at the board. We're still doing pretty well on the day at least. We look down at pocket queens under the gun. I raise to 20. The small blind calls, the big blind calls as well. We're going 3 ways to the flop in position. It comes jack 3 deuce rainbow. It's seemingly safe. Checks to us. We've got to continue firing before an ace or king for sure comes out. I bet 40 for value. This amount won't win us the pot. The small blind calls, the big blind folds. It's down to heads up. The turn is the 8 of spades. I like seeing that. Small blind checks. We're going for value again with a bet of 105. The small blind isn't capable of folding. His clothes are ridiculously wrinkled as he calls once more. The river is the king that we knew was coming. The small blind checks. It's tough to imagine us betting all 3 streets and getting called by worse. I check back. The opponent has jack 10 suited. No good. We turn over our queens. We've got the winner. It's been kind of a bizarre up and down day in which we haven't won or lost too many hands in a row. This one puts us up $275. It's evening when we pick up ace-6 suited in middle position as we're playing a few men down at our table. Under the gun raises to 30. I call. The cutoff calls as well. We're going 3 ways to the flop. The dealer puts out ace-10 deuce with 2 clubs. We've got it smothered with top pair and a flush draw. Under the gun isn't strong enough to bet. He checks. We've been working out lately and we're super strong. I bet 50. The cutoff must have a piece. He calls. Under the gun confirms our suspicion that he's weak. He folds. It's down to heads up. The turn is the jack of hearts. I don't love it because king queen makes a straight and jack 10 gets there. It's possible our opponent could have ace jack. I check for pot control. The cutoff likes his hand enough to bet 125. This guy has been playing on the tighter side. It feels like we're up against 2 pair or better. Still, we've got plenty of outs if we're not best. I call to hopefully improve on the river. The dealer puts out the deuce of hearts. Could be okay if our opponent has ace-9 or ace-8 because now we're at least chopping. I check. I wouldn't mind seeing a check back now that we've bricked. The cutoff doesn't care what we want. He goes with a big sizing and bets 350. As much as I'd like to reinforce the lesson about not calling when you're mostly going to be chopping at best, 350 from a player I perceive to be on the tighter side isn't the price that I'm comfortable paying. I fold. Then I immediately regret it as the cutoff starts to turn over his cards. It's almost always a bluff when people are quick to show for the vlog what they have without me prompting them.
Bluff me, king queen. Oh, nice hand. Nice turn.
There's no bluff this time. The cutoff is just a nice guy who shows that he had the goods. We get 3 outed once more to end our day a little stuck.